if you don't have an Opinel knife in your collection and you dig knives, you ought to think about picking up an Opinel or two. No, they're not modern. No, they don't have the same kind of locks that you might be used to. But they've got some cool history, some classic looks, and good utility. Hello my friends, this is Late Boy Scout, and on the table for review today are a handful of Opinel knives. Now if you haven't heard of Opinel knives yet, you ought to hear about and find out about Opinel knives because they are cool. Now there are some pretty interesting and important things to know about them before you buy them, and I'll get into all of that, but let's talk a little bit about what they are. So these are French knives that are basically a very kind of classic, almost peasant's knife. And knowing that this design has been around for such a long time, used in France and produced in France for such a long time, makes me really interested in it. You know, I'm always kind of I wouldn't call myself a history buff, but I'm a little bit of a sucker for something with cool history. And so learning about Opinel knives and getting my hands on them and seeing kind of the appeal of such a classic design really kind of turned me on. And I've really enjoyed these three Opinel knives, carrying and using and testing them a little bit. Yeah, I'm kind of hooked, you might say. I like them quite a lot. It does come in a couple different varieties. There's a carbon steel version right there, carbone, which is French for carbon, and inox, which is their way of saying stainless steel. All right, so sort of like Victorinox. You've heard of Victorinox. Part of the reason why the inox in Victorinox is stainless steel, or representative of stainless steel. And so that's why you get inox on these stainless steel versions of these Opinel knives. Savoie, France? Did I say that right? I have no idea. The Vibro Lock, which is, or Vibro Block? Let me make sure I have that right. I'm looking on the website right now and making sure that I don't get these details messed up. I want to say Vibro Block. That's correct. Vibro Block. Vibro Block is something else. Anyway, the Vibro Block is the locking mechanism on these knives, and it's such an interesting design. Let me display it for you. Again, some of you guys have already seen these knives, so I hope you stick around, at least get my perception of these knives, and you will see some testing of them here in a minute. But for those of you who haven't ever seen Opinel knives, I'll talk about how they work. So this, obviously there's a closed state that it can be in, and then this Vibro Block will rotate like so, and you can see that this is a tapered sort of cutout right there, which makes it so that blade will not open, so that is locked closed. Then if you rotate off, obviously, rotate that lock to this open state, then it allows the blade to open all the way up. And as you might guess, you've got a tapered state right here as well on both sides. So whether you're right or left-handed, whether you prefer to push it off this way or push it off that way, you will push it until it stops, won't go any further, and that knife, that blade, is locked in place. And it is quite a good lockup, actually. Side to side, it doesn't want to move. Front to back, it doesn't want to move either. So you'll get actually some decent work done with this very small, very light, very simple knife. Now, the handles, no scales in there, no stainless steel of any kind. It's carved out of one piece of wood. In the case of this one, which is an Opinel number 6, and you've got all different varieties of them, both in stainless and carbon. This one is made out of a walnut tree, actually, walnut wood, which, again, is one of the really cool things about them, because you can collect them, and they're super inexpensive. Have I said that yet? Super inexpensive. I'm talking like 15 bucks tops for an Opinel knife. And that's one of the larger ones. Maybe a little bit more, I'm not quite sure. And then you can get like these giant cases that have all of them in it, but I won't go into all that. But different woods, you can get different types of wood on your Opinel knife, and that's just super cool, and different stains. You know, this one is the carbon one. If you get the stainless steel one and the standard, I think it's beech, then it comes with a different stain than this one right here, which has got a slightly darker stain than the inox version. All right, so again, walnut on this number 6 right here, that number 7 that I got in carbon, and then the number 8 here. Guess what kind of wood that is? That's olive wood. And isn't that gorgeous? Man, these are just, I mean, these are almost designed set pieces, sort of display pieces is what I'm trying to say there. Almost display piece knives. But you get them for 15 bucks and then you can display them. So there's just a huge appeal as far as kind of the classicness, the history behind them. But what about sort of standard utility? So let's get into some of the testing that I put these knives through for sort of the standard EDC tests. Well, first off, I had to sharpen them because they come not just dull, but they don't really have an edge at all. So they're ground down to the point that, and they are like completely full flat ground, like sort of an infinity grind all the way down from the spine here all the way down to the edge. So it really is kind of like a full flat ground Scandi grind almost, except that it doesn't really come with a completed edge. So there's maybe some parts of the knife that are sharp when you buy it, and then a lot of the blade is basically completely blunt and you have to sharpen it. But once you do that, it takes a very fine edge. So I got both of these, or all three of these, on my knife and tool sharpener, work sharp knife and tool sharpener, excuse me, and put a very fine edge on all of them. So they will shave hair in an instant, and they will slice paper like nobody's business. You see a little bit of footage of that right now. I mean, they are scary sharp when you get them that way. And then, of course, slicing through cardboard, there's just almost no knife there. So considering that and realizing that there's, it's a very, very thin knife. Yeah, it's going to slip through cardboard. It's going to slip through all kinds of materials very quickly and very easily. So the, sort of the construction and the shape of that blade just lends itself to some great utility. And that's why I think any of these Opinels are just great knives. Then, of course, I dug into a little bit of wood with these knives, which is probably a harder task than you want to put these thin knives through, these thin little blades through. But they did pretty well. Digging into that wood anyway, I didn't want to pry away at it too hard to splinter off sections, but carving into it, man, they did better than some of the larger, tougher knives that I was testing that day. They just sliced right into it, man, dug right into it. Very, very sharp. Almost scalpel sharp. So aesthetically, I think they're very cool. They're very unique. They've got a classic look. Functionally, they are very good performers once you get them, very sharp and get a good edge on them. Great performers. How do they carry, though? Well, they don't have a pocket clip, as you can plainly tell. This is kind of like before the days of pocket clips. And that's fine. If you accept that and say, well, this is just going to be sort of a bottom of the pocket knife. I just fold it up, lock it closed, and drop it in my pocket. And when I have a small EDC task to take care of, this is going to be sort of like my sub-EDC for that. And I think that the number 6 is a great one. You could also go with the number 5 if you want to have a sort of a sub-EDC. I think the number 6 is about as low as you want to go and get a good handhold, though. Whereas the number 5 might get to the stage where it's kind of difficult to hold on to and really use. But then again, if you're talking about a sub-EDC, something that's the size of, here's the SOG Flash 1. You compare that to the Inox number 6 right here. Yeah, the Inox number 6 is actually quite a bit larger. So you could go down to the 5 and still have a pretty useful knife in your pocket and in your hand. So that's really cool. So yes, definitely some good utility to them. Some carryability. They are a little bit fat. I mean, there's that fact, basically made from a very small kind of broom handle or something. I don't know. But I mean, it's shaped in such a way that once you get it in hand and do some work with it, it feels great. And it's just got a classic, I keep saying classic, but it's just got a really comfortable feel to it because it's so rounded. But in pocket, it does, it's a little fat, it's a little bulgy, it's kind of thick. And especially when you get to some of the larger ones, that's the number 7, this is the number 8, and they, as they scale up in all directions. They get fatter and wider and longer and everything. So don't expect it to just get a little bit longer but stay skinny. So they do get a little more prohibitive as far as carry is concerned, depending on what your carry method is. If it's always going to be in your pocket, then yeah, it gets a little fatter and fatter the larger you go. If this is going to be like a kit knife or something that you put in, I don't know, a fishing pack or a backpack or something like that, it can be a fantastic knife for that. You know, just maybe it doesn't matter quite how thin it is. The weight is pretty light, especially because there's, besides the hardware up here and the pivot hardware and the blade itself, there's no hardware. It's wood. It's kind of a hard wood that's just a great performing knife. Opinel knives, man, they are inexpensive, fun to collect, fun to use, fun to carry. I think they would make really cool gifts, and definitely just fun knives to add to kits, add to add to some EDC rotation for a while. If you don't have an Opinel knife in your collection and you dig knives, you ought to think about picking up an Opinel or two. No, they're not modern. No, they don't have the same kind of locks that you might be used to, but they've got some cool history, some classic looks, and good utility. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this review of these Opinel knives. There's a big world of them out there. Check it out. I'm the Late Boy Scout. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you later. It'll carve nicely with that beautiful Scandinavian grind. It'll get all kinds of great survival and outdoors work done because it's just a great little knife, isn't it?